The Barren Grounds by David A. Robertson. Chapter 7. Morgan sprinted up 2 flights of stairs to the 2nd floor, slammed the door behind her, and stopped in the middle of the hallway. She was out of breath, but not from the stairs. Her chest was heaving, and she couldn't catch her breath because she was crying so hard. Each time she wiped her cheeks, they were soaked again, instantly. If her head was against her pillow right now, and the scene of the blizzard had burst back into her mind, she wouldn't be trudging through the snow. She'd be running through it. Her heart was racing. She'd run up the stairs with the intention of going to her bedroom, packing her clothes and leaving. They were just going to kick her out anyway now. She knew it. She had been removed from houses before. She'd run away from houses before. One way or another, with every house, eventually she would be gone. And that would be the same here. She bent over, put her hands on her knees, and stared at the carpet. "You jerk!" She forced herself out between sobs. "You stupid jerk! Those stupid jerks!" She looked up. She could hardly see her room through the tears. The open door, what lay inside, was just a blurry, dark vortex. Like, if she went in, she'd be swallowed whole and never come out again. She shook her head at the thought, looked down again, and the tears she'd shaken loose fell to the carpet, making tiny, dark blotches in the fabric. She felt like they might swallow her whole too. She felt like everything might. That everything was darkness, and maybe it was better that way, just to get sucked up into it and vanish. "No," she said, panting. She didn't want that. She didn't want to leave somewhere else. She'd left too many places. She was tired. She couldn't catch her breath from crying. She couldn't even catch her breath, just from life in the foster care system. And Katie and James, they were all right. They were good. She had not had foster parents like them before. Yes, they'd fed her bannock, and yes, they'd given her moccasins. But Katie had said they were trying, and weren't they? Was it so bad? Who tried to connect with her like that before? Even if she didn't want the moccasins, was that their fault? Maybe. Maybe not. She wanted to pull her head off. It was spinning so hard from confusion. "What just happened?" she whispered to herself. Then, out of nowhere, Eli's face was in her mind. How he was yesterday, how he was today. He changed so much just in that time. He was talking. She was talking. He'd asked why she was so angry, and she knew that she was. It was like he knew her as well as she thought she knew him. What, she was going to leave him now? What would happen to him? What would happen to her? She tried to even out her breathing. Tears kept dripping onto the carpet. On the 1st floor, dead silence. She pictured them all sitting there in stunned silence. She replayed what just happened, slamming the table, shouting, telling Katie that she wasn't a mother. Morgan buried her fingers in her hair and pulled. She wanted to scream, but didn't. Instead, she turned away from the carpet, turned away from her room, and started running. She kept running as far as she could run without running away. Another 2 flights of stairs, and she was in the attic. She looked frantically around the large room with its broken walls and piles of debris. There had to be somewhere to go, somewhere to hide, just for a little while, so that she could gather herself, so that when they came to get her, she would give her away. They couldn't find her. She scanned the room from left to right, from the places where she read most nights when Katie and James were asleep, all the way across to the painted-over door. That was it. Nobody had been in there forever. Forever was probable, and because of that, if she was able to open it, to get to the other side, it would be her real secret hiding place. And Eli could come in. Of course he would come in. But she had to open the door first. Morgan gripped the doorknob, turned it, and pulled. The door refused to budge. She put both hands on the knob, braced her feet against the baseboard, and tried again. There might have been some give. She might have imagined it, but either way, the door looked like just the way it had before. The paint laid over the floor, and the frame remained intact. In an effort that she knew would be fruitless, born of frustration, she lunged at the door with her shoulder, twice, but she only hurt herself. "Come on!" She stared at the door from top to bottom, waiting for a thought to come to her. Then her eyes drifted to some screws and nails and shards of wood littered all over the plywood floor, remnants of the ongoing endless renovation. Tools! She ran to the other side of the room, found the tool bag, and fished through it until she found what she was looking for, a box cutter. All she needed was to cut around the door and break the paint seal. Once that was done, she was able to open it, no problem. If she was able to do it so it wasn't noticeable, great. But James never came up here anyway, so it might not matter. Morgan stared at the bottom left corner and worked her way up. The paint was hard and thick, and it felt like she was sawing through wood. Still, as the minutes passed, she made progress. Up the side, across the top, and down the opposite side. In less than 10 minutes, she pushed the blade through the last bit of paint, and she stood up to regard her work triumphantly. Semi-triumphantly. Anybody could totally see that the paint had been cut away. She'd worry about that later. Morgan put her hand on the doorknob again, twisted and pulled. The door jolted like it was grasping to life as the latch bolt released. She pulled the door open and was greeted by a waft of stale air. She couldn't see anything inside the room. It was pitch black. She stood a few feet from the dark space and stared into it. She waited for her eyes to adjust, but the room stubbornly remained a mystery until she turned her phone's flashlight on. Inch by inch, left to right, the room revealed itself. Some mystery. It was just more unfinished attic space about the size of her bedroom. The wall to her left followed the slope of the roof, which the one on the right was just beams and plywood, the other side of it being the stairwell. The wall facing Morgan showed the brick outline of the house chimney. Courageous with a flashlight, Morgan entered the room, sat down facing the sloped wall, propped up her phone against the wall at her side. And that was that. She would stay here until the phone died. Morgan hugged her knees to her chest and buried her face between them. Acting like an ostrich again, she tried not to think about anything, but that didn't work. The entire day kept forcing itself into her head. Mostly breakfast and dinner. I should not just eat again. Problem solved, she grumbled. And the tears came back. The only difference now was that she wasn't sobbing. She was too tired to sob. The tears kind of fell, and Morgan didn't care much for them to stop. She too was too tired for that. After a while, she heard the door open to the second floor, and footsteps leading to one of the bedrooms. Katie's, she guessed. The same footsteps started up the stairs on the way to the attic. Great, she whispered without lifting her head. She knew she'd left the door open, which defeated the whole purpose of having a secret room. What kind of secret room was it if you forgot to shut the secret door? When the doorsteps reached the top of the last flight, she busily wiped her eyes and cheeks against her knees, removing the evidence of her tears. The footsteps stopped at the attic door, and she looked to find Eli standing there, looking at her, carrying his drawing pad. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said, giving her eyes one last wipe, this time with her sleeves. She sniffled, just in case there was any snot coming out of her nose. "How did you know I was up here?" "Everybody knows you're up here," he said. "You were loud." "Oh," Morgan buried her face again. "Are they mad?" "I think you're getting a pass," he said. "I don't deserve a pass," she said. "I'm a jerk." "Sometimes, maybe." She heard him enter the room and walk towards her, and she felt the floor compress with each footstep. She felt his shoulder brush against hers as he sat beside her. She kept her head down. She didn't want him to leave, but she didn't want to say anything. He must have known that, because he didn't say anything either. They just sat there on the floor in the secret room as the battery life of her cell dwindled. Sometime later, Morgan sighed. "The last place I was at," she said, "they used to tell me I was part of their family. I was there for almost 2 years, I think. They had 2 girls, 2 kids, a girl and a boy, and a dog too, Juby. That was the dog's name. Did you ever have a dog, Eli?" He nodded. "What was its name?" she asked. "Red," he whispered. "Their family, my foster mom's parents, lived in another town. It was like 3 hours away. They'd go visit every other weekend. My foster parents, the kids, and Juby, but I never got to go. They put me in respite care, get another family took after me while they were gone." Morgan wiped a tear away from her cheek with her knee. "They took the dog, but not me." Finally, she looked at Eli. "The last time they went away, I took off. Nobody found me for a few days. I don't know when they even started looking." She chuckled. "I wasn't hiding. I was just running, you know." "Yeah," he said. She ran her hands through her hair, pushed loose strands behind her ear. She smiled at Eli because he looked like he wanted to cry too. "I think I want them to want me, Funny, right? I want them to want me, so I ran away. She shook her head. Stupid. Anyway, she clapped her hands to snap them both out of it. They didn't, and here I am. You're not going to run away from here, are you? Eli asked. No, she assured him. I'm not going to run away. Good. I'm just going to move up here, like forever. They're not going to get rid of you. Maybe. But if you're going to stay up here, I made you a housewarming gift. Eli picked up his drawing pad from the floor. He opened it to the first page. He was being dramatic about it. The big paper was facing him, and Morgan couldn't see what he'd drawn. She tried to snatch it from him, but he pulled away. You don't tease a girl who had just had a meltdown, you know, she said. Okay, fine. He turned the paper around to reveal his work. Morgan gasped when she saw it. Not that it was scary or shocking, but it was a wonderful picture. When did you even draw this? Katie and James went into the kitchen and were whispering to each other for a long time, he said. I got bored. Can I? Morgan reached with both hands for the drawing pad. Eli let her take it. She placed the pad on her lap, picked up her cell phone, and shone the light on the drawing so she could see every detail. An animal being, Morgan wasn't sure what kind of animal, was walking through a field, its arm raised to shield its face from the wind and whipping snow. Funny. Its tracks were coming from the village in the distance. It wasn't going towards it. The village, all the way across the field, was nestled against a forest that stretched from one end of the drawing to the other. There were lights in the houses. As she looked intently at the illustration, she started to hear the same beats from that morning, as if it wasn't a drawing at all, as if the beast was walking towards her right now. Then she realized that she wasn't hearing the animal walking. Again, the sound was just pounding, her heart pounding. There was no wind, Eli said. Huh? Morgan tore her eyes away from the picture, but kept the pad open and on her lap. When I was drawing it, he said, there was no wind. Maybe. Maybe what? She asked. Maybe it wasn't coming from the paper, he admitted. And you're sad about that? She asked, because he did look sad. You wanted your paper to be haunted? He shook his head. I guess not. Exactly, she said. Magic is best kept to books. Plus, magic drawing pads that shoot cold air, that's lame. She held the pad up, inspected the drawing again, and this time heard no heartbeat, no footsteps through the snow. And there was no cold air coming into the real world. Everything that it was right there in front of her. The only mystery was the animal. But that was just because she didn't know it. She asked Eli. That's a fisher, he said. You saw them where you live? She corrected herself. Lived? Maybe she shouldn't have. He slumped. Yeah, I saw them out in the bush when I was hunting with... Never mind, I saw them. Did this come from a story you know? No, he said. I just kept drawing it. I didn't know what I was drawing. I had this picture in my head all day. Morgan held the drawing closer to her face. I think I did too, she said absently. Not really to Eli. You did? He asked. Well, I was walking instead of the fisher, but still, she said. Weird. The creature's black eyes were watching her, and it was creepy. It was like when you know somebody is staring at you. Goose pimples rose on her arms. She moved the drawing pad from one side to up to the other side down, but the fisher wouldn't take its eyes off her. She remembered how Mrs. Bignell had shown them that the Mona Lisa doesn't stop looking at you, no matter where you are in the room. She taped up a poster of the painting and had the kids move from corner to corner all around the room. She was right. This fisher was the animal version of the Mona Lisa. The odd thing about it was that she didn't quite want it to look away. We should put it up on the wall, she said. I didn't literally mean that it was for this room. Eli looked around at the place Morgan had discovered, unimpressed. Morgan stood up and started pacing around the small room. If Katie and James know that I'm up here, even if they're not going to kick us out, we need a new, even more secret place, and this is it. This is our new secret place? He repeated. Imagine the possibilities. For the first time all day, she felt excited. We'll bring up some comforters up here. Pillows? I'll bring some books. You bring pencils and stuff. I guess. Oh, and we could even get those lights that strap to our heads. While Morgan paced around the room, she saw Eli watching her, and it looked to her as though he was, as instructed, trying to imagine the possibilities. Really, she wasn't asking much. Blankets and pillows? Imagining that couldn't have been difficult. Okay, he said, sure. Yes! Morgan jumped up and clapped her hands. Yay! Now, first things, can I take this drawing out of the pad? Eli nodded. Thanks. Morgan pulled the drawing out carefully, then looked around the room for the perfect place. She pressed it against each of the walls, sliding it around on every imaginable spot, but settled on the slanting wall, the roof of the house. She positioned it so that she was centered exactly between the roof and the floor, wall to wall. Can you hold it just like this? Eli stood up and held the drawing in place. Good. Great. Megan placed her phone against the opposite wall, slanting it upwards so light showered over the illustration. Hold it there. She ran across the attic, dug into the tool bag again, and found a staple gun she had seen earlier when retrieving the box cutter. Moments later, she was back in their secret place. She positioned the staple gun over the top right-hand corner of the paper, squeezed it, and thwack! The staple shot into the wood, affixing the paper on the wall. A gust of air blew out of the paper, much stronger than before. Morgan's entire head of hair blew backward, as if a hairdryer had turned on to maximum power. But as quickly as the gust came, it was gone. Whoa, Morgan said. That came from the paper, Eli stated. It totally did. They stared at the picture, then at each other. Eli nodded at Morgan, giving her permission to add another staple. Another gust of wind, this one stronger still, and it was cold wind. It stung Morgan's cheeks, already raw from crying. This can't be happening, she said. And why now? Why not when I was drawing downstairs? He asked. Good question. Maybe, okay, I don't think this is cheesy, but maybe we have to be together? But why? I don't know. Morgan threw her hand in the air. I'm trying to think like this is a fantasy book. Maybe we have to be in the attic. It's kind of sweeter if it is us, not a room. Just saying. Sorry? Just kidding. I'm not trying to freak out. These things don't happen in real life. Oh. Morgan pressed the staple gun against another corner of the drawing. Should I? Yeah. Thwack! An avalanche of freezing air burst through the paper and pushed both of them back, almost opposite wall. And then it was gone. Morgan's hair was crazy, like she had just woken up or stuck a finger in an electrical socket. Even Eli's hair, usually perfectly braided, slick and beautiful, had strands blown out of the place. The attic was cold. The wind had come out like a lightning bolt, abruptly stopping each time, and it left behind a lingering chill. There was one corner staple left. Morgan placed the staple gun against the last corner. Ready? She asked. Ready. Thwack! The blizzard in the drawing room, once just pencil lines, stormed into the attic room. The kids stumbled backwards against the wall. Morgan tried to move to the side, out of the way of the wind, but there was no escaping it, and this time it was unrelenting. It wasn't just wind either. Snow was pouring into the room so fast and hard that it stung against Morgan's skin. She raised her arm in front of her face to shield it from the onslaught. Eli did the same. Within seconds, the floor was covered in white flakes. Morgan peered over her arm to look at the paper fastened to the wall. It had been a drawing, but not anymore. Now it was a window, but the window didn't open to the world outside the house. It opened to the world that Eli had created, the world that Morgan had pictured that morning. She could see the blizzard both in the attic and in the picture. She could see the near endless field of snow. She could see, just barely, the tree line far in the distance. She could see shimmering lights like tiny stars from the village. She could see the fisher. The animal being was walking towards them, at first slowly, and then it broke into a run. Snow kicked up behind it. Morgan screamed. Eli rushed forward, rippled the paper away from the wood, and the world was gone. It's ice cold, Eli said, dropping it. It floated to the ground like a snowflake. Morgan and Eli stood there, staring at each other for a long while, until Morgan whispered, "Pick up the drawing." It was on the floor, and the melting snow was beginning to dampen the paper. "I just let it go. Why do I have to do it?" he asked. It's your drawing, she said. Plus, I'm older. Eli kicked at the drawing first. A few snowflakes coughed out of it, but nothing more. He bent over it, tapped at it a few times, and then picked it up. He turned it over slowly to reveal that the picture was exactly as he had drawn it, the snow, the trees, the village. Only now the fissure seemed closer than he had before, and stuck in mid-run, coming right at them.